Of course, I am in the 80s. I have my own career. Yeah, so it was very hard to work with the wedges and stuff, but we know.
I'd like to introduce some friends of mine to you. Would you welcome Mr. Robert Plant, Mr. Jimmy Page, Mr. John
This is Robert Townsend. I'm backstage, and like I said, we're going to talk to Robert Plant in a minute, but everybody's here. Bob Geldof is standing right here.
Once again, everybody from ABC and all of it. It is now 1987.
I'm proud because it's such an outstanding honor to be in the company of some of the greatest artists of our time. I'm embarrassed because more than myself, it is all the artists who have been responsible for the music released on Atlantic Records who really deserve the recognition I'm getting.
5 fabulous albums, and to present the award, one of the greatest singers of all time from Led Zeppelin originally, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Plant. Never miss a trick, the mic stands too short. Okay, well, as you've seen, so many records that have been nominated and so many great records that have been missed or didn't quite make the charts, it looks like it's my job to tell you. I pull this out?
Pull it out. Always pull it out. When in doubt, pull it out.
I've been doing that for years. Okay, Best British LP, Brothers in Arms, Dire Straits.
March 4th, 1987. Former Talking Heads frontman David Byrne sings Hola Love at Tunnel Night Club in New York. I know this is random, but I mean it's David Byrne. And Robert Plant said he had an obsession with him in 1985, so it's full circle, I guess.
This is a thing they do in Japan called karaoke. I have here a lyric sheet to Whole Lotta Love. I gotta press the button again.
That man is Les Paul, and this week the music industry needed 2 nights to celebrate his 72nd birthday. Some of those artists Les has influenced greatly showed up at New York's Hard Rock Cafe to pay homage.
I had an LP in my very early days when I was about 15 or 16, and I was just totally mesmerized by it,
Just a certain aggression that wouldn't have been there without Les. A positive attitude towards playing.
Having been inspired by the man, Page, Al Di Meola, and others then had the opportunity to play with him. Even though Les Paul has created so many breakthroughs in recording, he finds his greatest achievement in just playing.
To take one guitar and play it straight.
So don't let anyone ever tell you that rock and roll has an age limit. At 72, Les Paul seems to be doing just fine.
June 15th, Virginia Woolf released Push, their second and final album with Jason Bonham.
Ven y disfruta durante todo el mes de marzo la gran promoción. Por solo 110 colones recibirás una entrada.
Todo un mundo mágico que invita a disfrutar.
September 17th, 1987. Yours truly, JCM, was born at the hospital past midnight. Sources say instead of crying, I yelled the intro for Immigrant Song.
Good evening. Today is Black Monday, the day the Dow dropped more than 500 points, the day the Dow dropped more than 22%, almost double the rate of the Black Monday that signaled the beginning of the crash of 1929. But this crash of 1987 is not just an American experience. Around the world, stock markets fell faster than a skydiver without a parachute. The panic starting in Tokyo this morning while the West slept.
But it only got worse as trading brokers struggled to cope with a blizzard of sell orders.
To Mexico, we have some work here to do.
It lost 17.5% of its value to 22.46 by Friday, and another 508 points today.
November 1987. Recording sessions for Robert Plant's fourth studio album began in London. The material mixed the best moments from his previous releases without jumping the shark in the electronics department. Ironically, this sounds like the kind of record Robert Blunt wanted to make in 1985. Robert learned a thing or two about the price you pay when following trends just because. Now and Zen is not without its problems here and there, but it's cohesive and honest. It sounds like a live show setlist that makes sense and tells a story. I kinda feel bad for the 85 band though. This album sums up their previous strengths like many fourth albums do, but finds Robert with a clear vision and determination to do things right. The 85 band suffer from Plant's whims. They went along with Robert's ideas. In the end, they could only congratulate him for Now and Then from a distance, knowing that they laid the foundations before and then. Looking at the records released in late 1987 and early 1988, Now and Then fits the musical narrative of what was going on through a new lineup of musicians at least 10 years younger than Robert. His songwriter partner, Phil Johnston on keyboards, helped Plant in finding his path. Guitarist Doug Boyle had some serious chops and was 11 years younger than Robert Blunt. His arsenal of tricks and textures was influenced by the new guitar sounds of late 80s virtuoso cats like Madman Steve Lukather and prime pre-baldness Joe Satriani. More specifically, Satriani's 1985 track, The Snake. Boyle had a menacing clear guitar game as well that echoed Robert Blunt's work in the past. I believe this gave Robert's music a direct connection back to what made his first two albums so good. It retained the roots, but changed perspectives. Like Robert said in Carouselambra, take off the fruit, but guard the seed. Drummer Chris Blackwell was a monster mix of Phil Collins and Richie Hayward, managing to keep things moving within the song. A hard hitter with great tempo. He could work around the drum set dynamics like a true musician. The bass work of session player Phil Scragg was precise and professional. Although he could be higher in the mix, his presence is the glue holding the pieces together. Charlie Jones would later come in as bass player for Robert's live shows, and well, he became a sort of Plant's protege. He married his daughter Carmen in 1991. His music style fit the band, and his energy was vibrant. He looked the part, and he could play the part. Charlie Jones was Robert's bassist of choice for Manic Nirvana, Fate of Nations, No Quarter Unleaded, Walking into Clarksdale, and 2002's Dreamland. The 10 songs are a journey through sights and sounds with emphasis on hooks and choruses. It does not overplay technology for the sake of being modern. It uses it accordingly. Heaven Knows was written by Phil Johnston and composer David Barrett. The track shows great influence from Depeche Mode's Music for the Masses from 1987. The song's production is reminiscent of Strangelove.
They wrote a song called Heaven Knows, which was on that album too, and it's a great piece of music. I mean, but all that techno, early techno Cubase stuff, and the guitars, everything was just so crazy, and then it became like it was all right. I was already in the middle of a whirlpool of oddness. Sounds like a prog rock album, but it was really, really weird, and it was great for me. I went, wow, I don't understand any of the way you're doing this with this stuff. And what do you mean you just do that and it's all there on that? Yeah, okay. And it was brilliant. It was really good. But we did some great stuff together.
Robert's love for modern day music and styles had him hooked on Heaven Knows. It was a starting point for the record, featuring the talents of Jimmy Page on lead guitar. Dance on My Own is a very 80s composition, dancing in the tightrope of sounding dated. The track is saved by the wisdom of Doug Bowles' guitar work that balances the potential cheese of the synths and chorus. Tall Cool One was an 80s version of Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll. It's no surprise it was a hit, and yes, it also features Jimmy Page on lead guitar. This is what 80s Zeppelin could have sounded like, indeed. I can see John Bonham playing this. It was a tour de force track in Plant's tour from '88.
See? The 80s.
I think that sounds like a strong tune.
What kind of heart?
Stomping rock heart is what
I say. I knew I had another name for my... I'll have a tattoo. Well, you know, the thing is, it's a riff from, is it Johnny Burnett's Rock and Roll Trio? I don't know. What is it? Where's it come from? At that point, you know, I'd given up with the whole idea of being a rock singer. You know, it's like, hello, is there anybody else out there who's got this thing going on? Oh, yes, somebody else can do that. I'm going to do this kind of camp rock, somewhere between Iggy Pop and maybe Talking Heads or something like that. Just go someplace where it's almost there, but it's letting you know it could be a lot more violent and a lot more cliche. The great thing about that was I was in, again, such a different period of time. Lighten up, baby, I'm in love with you. I mean, I wouldn't say that now, unless I had a reason. But yeah, it was good. I mean, really, really good. And the players were all readjusting, except for Barrett and Johnston, who were really, really... They took no prisoners at all with me at all. They thought I was some sort of museum piece that they could fuck about with. And they were about right, really, because...
Track 4, The Way I Feel, is one of Robert's finest pieces of the decade. The instrumental on its own is magnificent. His vocal delivery takes him back to the element that worked on Principle of Moments, but it adds a layer of bravado and confidence needed to make this necessary track for the closing 80s. He survived the 80s. Track 5, Helen of Troy, speaks in an absolute blend of Plant's solo career highlights up to this point. The song would have been a hit on the 1983 tour for sure. Now on to Billy's Revenge. This has Honey Drippers written all over, with a heavier guitar style echoing Brian Setzer and the psycho rockabilly movement of the early 80s in England. The track is fun and loose. It helps the listener prepare for what's next. Track 7, Ship of Fools, is the best song from the album. With elements of progressive rock and pop of the highest caliber, it finds Robert looking back on a solo career of 7 years and still finding his way like a restless soul. Doug Boyle's intricate guitar work is the stuff of legends, a special place where a minimalist approach works like 1,000 notes couldn't. And yes, one of the guitar motifs probably inspired the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication. The song's rhythm patterns and synth work elevate its power. Robert had been looking for this song since 1979 and found it through living. There's no other way to create timeless art that resonates with the collective fibers of humanity. After such a profound experience, track 8 works like a treat to get you out of the introspective void. Why is a Britpop song with a catchy chorus that shows us Robert's still human after all. It moves in the same vein of Electric Light Orchestra's Ladderworks, a melodic construction with, yes, a cheesy sounding synth that doesn't pretend to be anything else. The guitar layers are Def Leppard-ish, and maybe this is a song for the 90s, wishing it brings more answers than questions. Track 9, White, Clean and Neat, is weird. It exists in the universe of Shaken and Stirred, where jam sessions ended up as songs on the album. The CD version of Now and Zen included a bonus track, Walking Towards Paradise, written by American musician Jerry Lynn Williams, who also wrote songs for Eric Clapton, Bonnie Raitt, and B.B. King. I picture many 80s artists singing Walking Towards Paradise, David Lee Roth included. This one seems to not fit the album though. The composition is based around a specific mode of repetition and can be tiresome after a while, but it's good 80s. The chorus reminds me of Muse for some reason, not sure why. Robert was on a mission for riches, no more the shy singer who slowly came back in 1981. Hello vintage Percy hairstyle, with a modern businessman smile. December 17th, 1987, sessions for Jimmy Page's first solo album, Outrider, began. Jimmy's Soul Studios were now a commercial venture with Leif Masses, who worked as chief engineer and studio manager at Polar Studios as well. Page fitted his sessions around other musicians' bookings at the studio. This was originally intended to be a 2-album release. However, during the early recording stages of this album, Page's house was broken into and many demo tapes were stolen. Jimmy would reflect years later on their final product. Outrider's alright. It's demo-like compared with those overproduced albums that came out at the time. It didn't do very well, doesn't matter, but I did tour. Okay, Outrider. I used to own a copy of this on vinyl. It was given to me as a Christmas gift from someone who saw it and went, Jimmy Page? Yes, he'll like this. It's the guy from Zeppelin. It must be a good record. I remember getting the vinyl copy in wrapping paper. I wish there was so many albums, like ELP or Yes, or even The Song Remains the Same, which I didn't own on vinyl back then. I opened it up and I saw Jimmy, and I was like, nice, thank you. I've never heard Outrider, but I read the reviews at some point, and I knew it wasn't a favorite among Zeppelin fans. Revisiting the album for this post-Zeppelin video series was a good exercise. So what is the definition of Outrider? Let's see. A person in a vehicle or horseback who goes in front or beside a vehicle as an escort or guard. A mounted official who escorts racehorses to the starting post. A cowhand who prevents cattle from straying beyond a certain limit. So an outrider is not center stage but leads the way. Okay. Well, Jimmy did outdo himself in one thing on this album. The guitar sound is great. It has presence. Lots of presence. His tone finally gets to the promised land. If only he recorded his 1982 to 1985 output like this. Anyway. Track 1. Wasting My Time. John Miles. I really like his voice. He's a great singer. He can rock and roll without wasting my time. The opening riff is very much The Firm, and well, Tony Franklin on bass is brutal. Miles' vocals are up front, without the Paul Rodgers mid-range and preachy vibes. God bless him, but man, can he be tiring sometimes. John Miles hits the high notes and takes you for a ride through Jimmy's guitar kitchen. A great opener. Wanna Make Love is a good song, but the mix is not the best. The vocals are buried. And how can you bury John Miles? The guitars are quite loud and the drum's punch is lacking as it is absorbed by Jimmy's maniac playing and Dubán Laverde's solid bass playing. Track 3, Rites of Winter, featuring Jason Bonham on drums, is now a standard page shuffle. He had already presented an idea like this on Death Wish 2. It's more of a showcase than a song. I believe it worked best as an album opener instead. 3 minutes of this can get on your nerves if not in a proper mood. You know, the kind of mood of Saturday morning driving to the store or going up the country on a weekend warrior mission. Track 4, The Only One, is the closest thing to a semi-Led Zeppelin track of the 80s. We have Robert Plant on vocals, Jason Bonham on drums, and Jimmy. The only one missing is John Paul Jones. It sounds like Robert's now on Zen, but with a lot of guitar layers to the point of perpetual Zeppelin colors. Production-wise, it's a mess. There seems to be elements all over the place with no space for breathing. Plant does provide a good vocal performance, but with so much going on, it really needed John Paul Jones's wisdom and arrangements to make something out of this thing. Track 5, Liquid Mercury, is a good piece of music with Felix Christian bass. It's a best of Jimmy Page moments. This is the song you can share with someone who wants to get into Jimmy's body of work. Everything clicks, the riffs, the solos, the construction. This is good Jimmy. The drumming has character thanks to Barrymore Barlow, now on his second album by a Zeppelin member, having played with Plant on Principle of Moments. Track 6, Hummingbird, was written by Leon Russell. This cover version features Chris Farlow on vocals. Remember him from Death Wish 2? Well, the song is okay. It's a mid-tempo ballad, but what is it with burying the vocals in the mix? I get that it's a guitarist solo album, but Farlow's voice is passionate. In the end, it feels like a disjointed effort with a great guitar sound.
Social world, you can't come back, be the first in line.
Track 7, Emerald Eyes, is exquisite. It is well produced and Jimmy's playing is brilliant. His secret weapons, both acoustic and electric, work out a fabulous guitar army arrangement where you can appreciate his vision. This is prime Jimmy Page in one of his finest moments from the 80s, with Barrymore Barlow on drums. Track 8, Prison Blues, well, it's a blues with Chris Farlow again, on Not So Buried in the mixed vocals. Not much Page could improve from the blues runs he played with Led Zeppelin, but his soloing is quite a comeback to the Les Paul phrasing he was famous for. He put aside the Telecaster moods a la Jeff Beck of the past 5-6 years, and returned to his main acts. It seems he was emotionally ready to revisit the past with forgiveness and healing. This is his best blues playing in a long, long time. The closing number for Outrider is Blues Anthem, an acoustic piece that reaches saccharine, sappy ballad levels. Such a weird title for something that sounds more like a Christmas anthem for a network special than a blues song. Jimmy's solo is brilliant, but the rest of the song is missing Paul Rodgers, I guess. Overall, Outrider is not a bad record per se. The playing is good, and it features professional musicians, but more attention to detail and a better mix was needed to appeal to a broader audience past Zeppelin fans, musicians, and non-musicians. If anything, this album got Jimmy back at playing his Les Paul, a feat by itself, and it reminded everyone that he could still rock if he wanted to. This is his recovery album. He survived the 80s. Jimmy has been promising a follow-up release for the past 35 years. His inner artistic battles must be tough. The more he lived, the more it seems his destiny was to be in Led Zeppelin, and like a scientist, create the world's atomic bomb of rock and roll. His post-Zeppelin works take the scientist from the atomic bomb on to make prescription medications. It's not the same thing, but it's the same brain, the same man, a rock and roll legend, forever.